Electrocast.
Wesley, where have you been? I have really missed you.
Who was this love of yours?
Oh, my sweet Wesley. A farm boy. Poor and perfect.
Why did you come here, Wesley?
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
We're gonna sizzler. It's Wesley Month.
Strong stuff, all right. It'll take a month.
A month?
Wesley Month.
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
Studi. Snipes. Ichishta. Welcome to Wesley Month at Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
the titular Wesley.
And to kick off Wesley Month, we are talking a movie from 2017, Hostiles.
Who is the Wesley in question as in representing Hostiles?
WES STUDI, who plays Chief Yellowhawk.
The amazing WES STUDI as Yellowhawk, our premier Native American indigenous peoples actor. One of my absolute favorites from Last of the Mohicans, our discussion available now at orwhatevermovies.com. Dances with Wolves and all good Indian movies. Native American movies, indigenous movies, some of which we propose to cover this month. However, it could be the other Wesley. I thought maybe you were trying to say something, man, because Wesley Quaid got it right out of the gate. Opening scene, shot through the gut, head cut off, scalp cut off, and Wesley is dead. That's cold, dude.
Yeah, Wesley Quaid, an untimely death. You think they could have been a little bit more prepared for the Comanche raid?
Yeah, number one, he didn't attempt to negotiate. Number two, he didn't seek cover. You maybe get yourself behind a barrel or a railing or within the house or something.
Yeah, that's true. It was like he had a death wish. Why didn't he just run with the women? When you know that a merciless band of Indians on the warpath are coming for you, don't you just tuck tail and run?
If we know anything about Wesleys, it is that Wesleys do not tuck tail and run. They go forth to meet their destiny head on, whatever that may be.
Okay, we get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk a little bit about Wesley Month.
Okay.
Every year, we pick a theme month. This month happens to be April. Why?
Well, because last year, I think it was June or July, which was smack dab in the middle of Barbenheimer month, where we couldn't release those episodes because we were in the middle of a themed month.
That's right. And in the previous years, we've had what themes?
We've had Nicolas Cage month recently. We had James Cameron month.
And then last year, in honor of the writer's strike, we did Christopher McQuarrie month.
Writer, director, producer, particularly these days on the Mission Impossible films. Iris suggested Wesley month, to my surprise, as a tribute to me.
And the movies and actors that we love. And so we got some real goodies for you. We're kicking off Wesley Month with Hostiles. So WES STUDI, you were saying, is the man.
Yeah, he is. Has been the man for decades.
And had you seen Hostiles?
If I had seen Hostiles, it was saddled by the fact that I didn't have subtitles at my disposal, and this was a mumblecore movie. I couldn't understand a damn thing anyone was saying.
Yeah, it's a whispery type movie. Christian Bale, I counted the times he raised his voice beyond a whisper. One was when, for some reason, he decided to repeat all of Rosamund Pike's commands.
Drop them!
Like
the shovels? Yeah.
I don't know why that was so funny to me, but he got all animated and captainy.
And you know why, right?
No.
Because nobody plays tortured like Christian Bale.
Dude. And he's severely hampered by that handlebar mustache.
That obscures the mumble mouth that we're forced to read.
It's all in the eyes. And damn, you're right. Christian Bale, burning behind the eyes.
Oh, man. Also, could be said, burning behind the eyes of Rosamund Pike, who is the last bastion of the wide-eyed Englishwoman in peril. Or whatever, she looks so scared all the time, and you just want to rescue her and repeat her commands so that they're heeded.
Drop them! When Rosamund Pike as Rosalie Quaid is teaching her daughters about grammar, I was like, wow, when Rosamund Pike smiles and she's playing happy, she's so pretty. Well, she's always pretty, but when she wants to be icy or scary, like in Gone Girl or Saltburn, you're like, ooh.
But teaching the girls grammar, and you're like, oh, look, she's, a good mother and is really contributing to those lovely little girls' education. And that's a good, oh, they're dead.
Dude, they get picked off.
And then the baby was dead. And then, and Todd was in this one. And you see Jesse Plemons, and immediately we're both like, fucking Todd. And then he is the soulful one. He is the conscientious one. And the Danny Masterson looking dude who's not Danny Masterson was like, I killed everything that walked or crawls and I deal with it. You got to deal with it. And Todd's like, okay, I will just try to see the world. The whole point is to see the world in a better way. And you're like, that's a wonderful, oh, he's dead. And then Danny Masterson is dead. And then everyone is dead. And you're like, okay, so it feels to me like this is so distinctly a political movie, and I don't know if that is because of all the supplemental material that I've seen, but this is a message Western for sure. It's a mess-tern, and some of it is lost. A lot of it is lost because in showing the brutality of the West in Hostiles, and get it? We don't know who the hostiles are. Who are the hostiles in this movie? Are they the whites? Are they the Apache? Who are they? It doesn't matter because everyone is dead.
Apache or Comanche?
Apache is what I wrote down. Chief Yellowhawk and his ilk being Cheyenne. I could be wrong.
Quite the cast here in Hostiles that Scott Cooper has assembled. Scott Cooper, by the way, our director of The Pale Blue Eye, our discussion for which is also available on orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts. And that's also a fairly meditative movie.
It is.
But boy, can this guy attract some talent. It's an incredible cast, even if Jesse Plemons isn't quite at the height of his fame, and Timothée Chalamet certainly isn't. And when I thought that Rory Cochrane was Danny Masterson, I was like, ooh, Danny Masterson and Jonathan Majors? Ooh.
Oh, man. Canceled.
But Ben Foster, talk about like baddie of all time, Ben Foster.
Oh, Ben Foster, also the man. And this is his reunion from 3:10 to Yuma with Christian Bale.
So 3:10 to Yuma predates this.
Yes.
And you also talked about Hostiles being a mess-tern, which I think has multiple uses because it kind of gets a little messy, especially in the muddle in the middle.
Muddle of the middle.
But what happens? So how does this political Western fit in? Is that what Westerns are now because we're woke and more aware than ever, perhaps, of the atrocities inflicted upon the indigenous North American peoples?
Well, it is a continuation of the postmodern Western. Kind of kicked off. I guess Sergio Leone started with the anti-heroes, but Unforgiven was about sort of the death and dispelling of the myths and legends of the romantic gunfighter. Hostiles is in no way romantic. Despite Q'orianka Kilcher, who plays Yellowhawk's daughter, she said she always wanted to be in a Western because it's so romantic. And I was like, and you chose this one? It really is about the death of the West and about the atrocities that can no longer be ignored. And not to suggest that it was a romantic sunset of a death, but that it was forced into submission via bloodshed and lawlessness and the post-war trauma of, what Joe, Captain Blocker, Christian Bale's character, experienced, what he witnessed, all his friends go down at the hands of this maniac who is also just a person who's damaged like him, like Ben Foster, any one of us. It could be you in these chains. It ain't right, you judging me. You know what I mean? They're all survivors and they're all in their own way cancer-ridden and saddled with saddled with the grief and the guilt and the burden, the trauma of the Civil War and generally the lawlessness of the West of that era.
So these are all the turn of the century anxieties that plague the West, that plague the United States at this time. They're dealing with the fallout from the wars, and they're also they're beginning to grow a conscience about how things went down. And so as embodied by our characters who are beginning to have all of these mixed and complex feelings.
Yes, but also, these are the dregs. These are what's left over because in other ways, America is modernizing. There are trains. There are towns. He's in his dapper, gentlemanly suit with his Western mustache at the end. The world is changing and seemingly for the better, but the people who still live on the fringe. It's basically a post-apocalyptic movie, this landscape where at the same time some people are flourishing, other people are wallowing in the mud puddle that's left. Mirror Lake in Yosemite was glorious and renowned for its mirror-like quality, the stillness of the water where you can see the glacier-carved cliffs of granite above your head, and then it's slowly filling in with silt and sediment, and they're actually aiding that effort by filling in Mirror Lake. So eventually it will become Mirror Meadow. But it's like they always loved Mirror Lake, and they go up, and now it's a little puddle in the off season, maybe muddy, and these are the people that are kind of still wallowing in the muddy puddle that was the lake of the romantic, I guess, Wild West, the boomtown frontier type of stuff that birthed the West, the gold rush and all that kind of stuff. And then it became uprisings and greed and military and might and displacing indigenous peoples and stuff. And Christian Bale is never going to escape. Joe Blocker is never going to get out of that mindset, regardless of what suit he wears or what train he hops on.
And so this gives us context for the characters, but how does it really come to bear on this, what is essentially a journey story? This is a get them to the church on time in multiple respects, right? Captain Joe is simultaneously on multiple missions.
I don't know how it comes to bear, quite frankly, because as I said, everyone dies. Number two, Kelly Ray from the first pop, she was like, this is not right. She was concerned about a setup because she's like, why are they being escorted? These prisoners of war, and because he's suffering from cancer, I get it. But why does he have a military escort? Why don't you just let them free? Is it because they knew that the Apache were out there, or between there and home, given that they were going to be on horseback anyway, they would encounter any number of opposing tribes?
Yeah, it's not 310 to Yuma where Christian Bale needs to get a convict who is in custody onto the prison train or whatever.
Right.
They are free, or, for all intents and purposes.
And get this, it does seem that for the majority of their route, it was railroad adjacent. He could have basically taken a train home.
Huh.
It is a fictional, historical, epic thing, and thus some license, some liberty. You can do whatever you want with fictional characters. And so they weren't beholden to the fact that there's trains right there. Those trails were obviously made by automobiles with a wider base than a horse would make, a wider wheelbase. I couldn't get out of my head this idea that they had created a sedentary movie where maybe he is a Dances with Wolves style last outpost where this prisoner is being housed and they're repelling things like the Apache attack that killed Wesley Quaid and his most of his family at the beginning. And then someone was like, well, let's have him moving. Let's get him to do stuff. Let's get him to ride horses. So they made it a journey movie.
If they just turned him loose, they'd probably want to go home to Montana anyway. And even if they didn't, I think that the military and the government would still have gotten the press that they wanted. And I imagine them hauling ass across the country. Why, even in this arrangement, are they plodding along trail ride style? I would think that, especially if the Apache are on your tail, don't you haul ass out of those canyons where you're all like hemmed in and sitting ducks?
Yeah, but number one, WES STUDI and family were chained to the horses. Couldn't go anywhere. If things go awry or if a horse rears up, you're toast, right? And secondly, none of them were American. Everybody was British in this movie. Can British ride horses? Can Rosamund Pike tear along a Western trail?
Sure, come on. Christian Bale knows how to ride a horse.
It's true. And you never can tell what Rosamund Pike is going to do with a gun in her hand.
That's what well, it's true. And they were only chained for part of the time. So it was intentional that this be plotting. And to signify that, they're literally plodding along on the trail. And because it's intentional, they are creating an atmosphere for moments like them standing on the bluff or whatever and talking about mortality. And Jesse Plemons is a character always has to have like, I killed my first man moment.
Yep.
And it doesn't feel like I expected it would feel. So they can have these types of more introspective conversations where Ryan Bingham can do his compulsory song, like play on an instrument and sing, by the fire and stuff. And I'm down with that, except I lost the thread of what drove the narrative. Christian Bale's on this mission. He's got to deliver the Cheyenne. Then they encounter Rosamund Pike, and then he takes it on as his own responsibility to take care of her. They get to Fort Winslow, and then he has a new assignment to escort Ben Foster, who's a prisoner, to be tried and probably hanged. And then things get real messy. The Native Americans die, or at least some of them do. And then it becomes a story about Christian Bale and his kind of ragtag family of the dregs trying to start a new life.
Yes. I mean, I can sum it up in 10 words. That was like 50 words.
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
Go for it.
Sad people died. Sad people raped. Sad people had sex.
But they don't actually consummate.
Didn't they?
When? In the tent?
When they were cuddling in the tent.
No.
They were nose to nose, all stinky and stuff.
Yeah, well, that they just needed each other. They were both stricken with their grief.
So it was implied, maybe. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was implied to me. I got that assumption. Was it not implied that she and Koryanka Kilcher were raped?
When they were kidnapped by the fur trappers?
Right. So they were kidnapped, and when we saw them again, they were bound together outside of the tents, and they were all bruised and bloodied.
Maybe, but you think that Rosalie Quaid would wear all that trauma, like a heavy garment, for the rest of the movie.
Like the trauma of her entire family being massacred in front of her eyes and some within her arms?
Okay, so I get it. That's rough, dude. It's rough, but they spend like 40 minutes on it. We don't have to grieve in real time. Come on.
Yeah. So he knocks on her tent flap or whatever and says, we should be moving on, Ms. Quaid or whatever. Do you think you could ride? And I took from that they had indeed been raped. And that was just like a Native American or indigenous reality, maybe, that one of their women folk would be raped and mistreated and stuff. And he was like, it's not that he was stoic. Chief Yellowhawk was stoic about it, but he acknowledged the grim reality of that situation. It just wasn't directly implied, because if it is, then you're like, man, Rosalie Quaid has the worst time in this movie of anyone that's ever. And then the damaged dude follows her around at the end. That's what we're going with.
Yeah, so that they can create their piecemeal family. The fur trapper thing, that was after she decided she wanted to be with Captain Joe. That was after Fort Winslow, where she had a chance to start anew in this city, this up-and-coming semi-cosmopolitan city. But she decided she wants to stick with Joe because he's her protector?
But the ambiguity of that decision, or that one made sense to me. I was like, yeah, of course, you have to go with him, not just for the purposes of this movie. But honestly, I felt icky about him saying, see that she's taken care of. I'm off on this new punk-ass mission you're sending me on. Take care of her. And she's like, there's no more for me here than in my burnt-out house, right? Yes, I'll probably be protected, but what am I to do in Fort Winslow, Colorado, when I could hang out with you and I don't know, have some usefulness, have some purpose? I mean, it wasn't exactly within regs. And as an officer, he should know that her safety was paramount and she was risking herself. Is going to slow the operation down, is going to be another mouth to feed, which for his ultimate goal, I guess, of transporting this prisoner in conjunction with getting Yellow Hawk back home. But it was all kind of not within, like, was he off of active duty? Was he retired by the time he decided to turn around and hop on that train? I'm not really sure. It seems like it was just a Wild West out there in the Wild West.
And that may be the case. But this was definitely you fly for Top Gun or you don't fly again for the U.S. Navy kind of a situation.
Yeah. And thank you for that connection to Top Gun Maverick.
So he didn't have a choice, but the idea was that this was his last mission. He was already 1 foot out. And so I assumed that once they're at the train station and he's all besuited or whatever, that he's done his duty, his service is over, he's retired, and he also doesn't know what he's going to do with himself. He has no more purpose standing in that platform on his suit than he does going to wherever it was, Chicago, with Rosalie and the little Cheyenne boy. But we get away a little bit from our purpose for Wesley Month. My biggest problem with Hostiles is not that the story kind of changes or at times meanders. My problem is that, for a third build character or actor, Wes Studi and his Chief Yellowhawk character, pretty one-dimensional.
Yeah, he goes to speak to him in the tent and he doesn't say a word. He just kind of points in the direction. He has a few responses, but he never really leads a conversation. About the most closest he comes to having an active role and being assertive is him insisting on leading the ambush of the fur trappers, right, to get his daughter back.
Well, he also takes down a couple dudes in the Apache raid.
That's because he's Wes Studi. He's the man. It's like saying that is Captain Joe Blocker going to use his gun? Of course he is. He's in the military. Chief Yellowhawk has to throw down at some point, right?
Yes.
But he talked, Wes Studi, who's very eloquent and has been around forever, he talked about the conscientiousness of accepting this role. It's his part in Westerns as American storytelling and representation for indigenous peoples, having a message. This movie, 2016 or 17, when it was produced, is like today a time of relative political turmoil in the U.S. And he wanted this very much to be a message movie about, acceptance and forgiveness and differences in cultural practices and just nationality, I guess. He said that he really hopes, like Christian Bale, that this starts a small revolution in terms of movies that are more compassionate about understanding the differences in human flaws, in accepting the differences in people and coming together. And then he didn't say a word in this movie, pretty much.
And I mentioned the third billing because, obviously Lily Gladstone and her rise to prominence plays a central, if not the lead role of Killers of the Flower Moon. And so he's not a terribly active character. I get it, he's sick and all, but even his family, pretty undeveloped, kind of just a few more bodies to litter the field at the end.
And that's kind of the point. He got home just in time to die and then would never have wanted Joe to fight for the burial rights of a dead, at the time called Indian, again, his sworn enemy. It's great that he's doing that and all, but I don't think that for Joe Blocker's understanding and acceptance to the point where he's willing to fight, that he would have wanted the entire rest of his family to die except his grandson in service of protecting those Montana burial rights.
I don't know. This is when that Wild West honor thing comes into play, and I'm like,
Yeah, and Joe went to fight, and Kelly Ray was like, don't do it that way. Like, they're going to blame it on if the white people get murdered, people are going to think the Indians did it anyway.
It was all in service of Joe being able to have that turn. He needed to show that he had changed his mind.
Yep. And how does he show us that he has changed his mind? I guess he makes that stand. And aside from that, really the turn in his character is telling his sworn enemy of Yellowhawk, who apparently before his eyes had a direct hand, a literal hand in massacring his friends. He said, I saw him take a knife to my friend. Didn't he say that to Quaritch?
To Stephen Lang.
Yeah.
Yeah, he mentions the specific names of two friends repeatedly.
Yeah, but he told him that dude killed his friends directly himself, and then tells that dude later to go on, in a good way, to his sworn enemy, basically saying, I care for you, love you or whatever, and will defend your family after their little road trip, which is the turn for his character. But I didn't really see the genesis of that turn as it was happening. I didn't understand it until he, approaches him. Like, was there any bonding that they did that would suggest that he would do a complete 180 in terms of his regard for Chief Yellowhawk? Like, did that emotional turn have precedence, have substance?
Well, I mean, Joe is a fiercely loyal guy, but when he and Yellowhawk are on the same side, I think he's grateful for, Yellowhawk's defense of their their little caravan. I think that he sees him as a family man. I think that Ben Foster serves as a mirror to show Joe his own atrocities, and that he is different, that he's able to kind of see who he's become or what he's done as being less than good, if not bad. So I think it's earned.
Okay. Is the movie enough to sell that turn and thus to bring conscientiousness to the senseless bloodshed and horrors of the West? And does it effectively convey its message to the viewer without having to watch DVD extras?
I mean, I think no reconciliation, no return to humanity, no growth and nurturing of a conscience can reverse the horrors that brought them to the place where they were today. Like, nothing undoes it. But what can you do? You get on the train and you continue to live your life.
Christian Bale, in fact, wanted it to be more dour. He was adamant that Joe Blocker would just walk off the platform and into oblivion to be forgotten by history. Really resisted the idea of even getting on that train. It's not that they ran up for an emotional embrace and committed to a life together to make the world a better place. All he did was lift his foot and step on the platform of the train and was done. It was the smallest concession for hope or for this idea of broken romance and nurturing each other and licking each other's wounds. Ew, that sounds gross. It was like the merest modicum of hope and redemption in what Christian Bale considered to be a movie ending that he strongly resisted.
But would it have been better if he walked off into oblivion?
It's what I expected. I'm not sure how, within the narrow confines of this movie, how it could have had a broader, more effective message, I suppose.
Are there other Westerns that deal with this? Are there elements of The Last of the Mohicans that got it right?
I mean, I think it always goes back to Unforgiven. I watched Unforgiven immediately after this because I always watch Unforgiven anyway. It's worth noticing that the Danny Masterson looking dude in Todd's dialogue when he's talking about killing, that's almost straight out of Unforgiven in two ways. You know, first time I ever killed a man, when you're talking about how that's something of a Western trope. And likewise, the Danny Masterson looking dude, I think he directly quoted Will Money of Unforgiven when he said, "I've killed everything that walks or crawls." You know, women, children, just short of dynamiting the Rock Island Railroad. It was exact, taken directly from Unforgiven. This movie owes that movie kind of a lot. And yet its themes, while they weren't so direct, it wasn't about forgiveness of a specific person. As a matter of fact, largely the people in Unforgiven were unforgiven. Get it? Still, thematically, it was a more effective, a more profound, I dare say, a more moving and overall enjoyable experience. There wasn't a single moment of levity in Hostiles. Kind of a hostile movie. It was all navel gazing, and when you're looking directly at a navel, you tend to filter out or miss some of the things that are happening in your typical line of sight.
Now I'm even losing track of what the purpose was. Like, what is the political message? That, that there was nothing heroic about the quote unquote conquering of the West, that atrocities were committed and nobody can quite atone for those sins?
The message is that we all have blood on our hands because we're all human. Both the goodness and the badness, we've all done horrible things. So we can't judge people based on, number one, their acts as a whole or as a people, i.e. the Native Americans or the indigenous aren't bad necessarily, even though some of them are clearly bad. The whites are also bad. Can't judge people on their past mistakes, can't judge people by their differences or the color of their skin, and that through it all, if you can't find forgiveness and togetherness, what's the point? In this movie, they did find forgiveness and togetherness, but ultimately they all died. So my question was, what was the point? Which seems to be your question.
And I guess that's also summed up in the opening quote, which says something to the effect of, to be an American is to be a killer, or America is founded on murder. How do we come back from that? And you're saying it's to forgive and to reconcile and togetherness.
Except for the French. Kill the French as soon as possible and only wound the black guy so you don't fall into that trope.
God. And so that's maybe why, despite a stellar cast, a seasoned filmmaker and filmmaking team, and, a genre that keeps on giving, Hostiles is kind of only an all right movie.
I love Westerns. I think Christian Bale is good for Westerns, has been in better Westerns prior to this. Wes Studi is the man in Westerns, even if he is kind of never the good guy. But he was kind of the good guy, even though he was a murderous killer in this movie, at least in his youth. Kind of dour, even for a Western. Who loves dour Westerns, who watched the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford on repeat post-breakup. That's me. Not so much Hostiles for me, also angered by the fact that I couldn't understand what anyone is saying, so I had to lean in, turn the volume way up for a movie that ultimately underwhelmed me thematically as well as audibly. I'm going with a whatever just because I know that this is the first, possibly second, and certainly the last time I will put in Hostiles. It doesn't fit in the Westerns that I love because of the reason I love Westerns. Some of it is cool. Some of it is killing. Some of it is gunslinging. And some of it is the sober reflection, get it, sober, of the drunken, murderous past, as in Unforgiven. But there's element of adventure. And this one was just too plodding.
I'll give the sober, somber, dour, solemnness of Hostiles a good, because in good conscience, I certainly can't give Young Guns a good.
Come on, you did.
You said, I can't. Well, I'm saying I can't give it a good and give Hostiles a bad. You said that Young Guns was your second favorite political movie?
Yeah.
And Hostiles, whose whole aspiration is to be political.
There were so many things that were for the convenience of the story that subversively you can't consider this a historical movie in almost any basis. Scott Cooper, you keep doing your dour Christian Bale thing. We'll see what comes of it. Wes Studi is the man, and I hope will continue to be the man for another couple of decades.
I know that the other Indigenous American actors wanted to do this because of Wes Studi. And we're doing this movie because Wes Studi, because it's Wesley Month here at Or Whatever Movies. Stay tuned. Check back in to the podcast for Wes Studi in Geronimo,
an American legend.
Wesley Snipes in White Men Can't Jump, and Wesley Snipes in Blade. Plus, we have a bonus for this theme month, which is, how did you find it, Wes?
I cross-refed their two filmographies and thought, it didn't happen. Why didn't Wesley Snipes and Wes Studi ever do a movie together? They did! Undisputed with Ving Rhames.
We hope you enjoyed this discussion on Hostiles. If you did, give us the highest rating wherever you listen to this podcast. Become a movie friend on Patreon and let us know what you thought. 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com is how you get in touch. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, what's happening out there, everybody? This is Lawrence Ross, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my podcast, The Lawrence Ross Show.
Egomaniac.
It's a 2-hour weekly exploration into my mind. I also do sketches, celebrity impersonations.
You're out of order!
And I also do song parodies. Not too shabby for a blind guy.
Not only are you visually impaired, but you are geographically impaired.
New episodes are released every Friday. Check it out on your favorite podcasting platform or listen to it here on Society 13 on Electrocast.
Hey, it's Tim from 50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys, the comedy podcast you had no idea you needed. Join Ben, Jeff, and me as we continue our musical road trip back through the years and around the globe. See, just when you thought all white guys were like Joe Rogan, you come across 3 educators trying to remember when we were cool.
50 Years of Music with 50-Year-Old White Guys.
Electrocast. Electrocast.